now. Good. Good. Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight to hear the shir by Rabbi Pinchas Winston. The shir tonight is going to be recorded by Facebook Live and audio of MP3, and the links will be sent out in the coming days. Just to let you know, at the back of the shul, Rabbi Winston's books are available for sale. Tonight's shir is being sponsored by Yehuda Shamroth of the Miriam Project Geula Hour. I'd like to personally thank Yehuda for organizing tonight's amazing shir on such short notice. Thank you, Yehuda, for taking care of this for RBS and Klal Yisrael. I also like to thank Cheryl Brenner, who helped collect the entrance fee and the books. I ask everyone to please turn off your phones, your cell phone beepers, or any other devices, so not to disturb Rabbi Winston and the shir. Yudis and I are privileged and honored to present you to Rabbi Winston tonight. Both of us have known Rabbi Winston for many, many years. And every time we hear him, we're always blown away and captivated by his amazing topic in shir. It is a pleasure and honor for Yehudis, myself, and the community to once again host Rabbi Winston. Rabbi Pinchas Winston is an author and internationally known lecturer on so many topics of Torah philosophy. All are well versed on traditional Torah sources and provides important insights into how one can make the most of life. The famous topic, of course, is the end of days and Geula. He has written and produced countless essays, books, CDs, and I can go on and on and on. And he's been on the radio as well. Rabbi Winston is taught at Asia Torah Academy in Jerusalem, Neve Yerushalayim Seminary, Neve Zion, located in Telstone, and also been in Canada, the United States, and England. I welcome you to tonight's amazing shir on Geula Concepts You Need to Know, Part 2. I hope you enjoyed tonight's wonderful and insightful shir. Thank you all for coming, and without further ado, Rabbi Winston.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I'd rather not. Last night, I was sent on a mission to get something for somebody, and it was a friend's house. I've known for many years, who actually has a son who's a son-in-law, a son and daughter, living right now in Chutz La'aretz, living in America. They're doing a job in Kiruv. They've got a purpose. They're not just there. They're reason. I haven't seen him for a while. Actually, on going to shul, he passed me, but there's somebody else in my kiryat that looks a little bit like him. So I wasn't sure if it was him, so I didn't say hello. It happened all fast. And later on, when I stopped by the house, I saw it was actually him. I said hello, and I asked him, "Are you back? Are you back, or are you going back to where you came from?" And he said, "We're just here for a couple more days." He was here for a little while. Then he made the mistake of asking me, "So where's the Geula?" If he hadn't asked that question, I was going to pick up what I came for. I wanted to go home and supper, Rosh Chodesh. I wasn't interested in getting a discourse and discussion about redemption, things like that. But he made that mistake of asking the question, "Where's the Geula?" I smiled, right, and I said, "Do you really want to know? It's a lot closer than you think." The truth is that he's actually heard some of this material before, but everyone seems to forget it. Everyone seems to forget it. The source I'm going to read you tonight and discuss tonight is a source I've gone over so many times. It changed my life. It changed my kivun. It changed my direction. When I saw it the first time, I read it over again. And I must have read it 25 times at least before I was prepared to talk about it in public. What if I got it wrong? What if I got it wrong? What if I got it wrong? It's a major turning point of hashkafa. The amazing thing is even after I began to discuss it, and I started to travel a bit more and tried to get that message out further and wider. I was in England, invited to speak at a shul, small shul, by a young rabbi who actually was in Eretz Israel, and a Talmud of a very prominent rabbi who was very familiar with this material as well. And he said to me, he called me over, I think after this year, maybe before that, I think it was after this year, he called me over and he said to me that I've gone through the Leshem, that's the source of the material that I'll be reading to you from. You know, the Leshem, his name was Rav Shlomo Eliashiv. You're all familiar with Yosef Shlomo Eliashiv, who was the Gadol Dor, who was Nifter, 10 years ago, 12, 50, a long time already. Right? His grandfather was the great Kabbalist Rav Shlomo Eliashiv, who was known as the Leshem because that's what his Sforim were called. Leshem Shabbat B'Achlama, that's the third plate in the eighth that the Kohen Gadol wore. He called it that because of the letters of his his name inside of it, as he used to choose names in those days. And I'm sure there's more Kabbalah involved, like the stones gave off light, but that's what he called his Sforim, Leshem Shabbat B'Achlama, and he became known as the Bahal Leshem. The Leshem, that's what they called him. And even how I got involved, it's also a major story about Shkabah. But when I got to this point in the Sefer and I read through it, and it was unbelievable. So everybody who's gone to the Sefer should have seen it, should have known it, should have come across it. This person pulls me up, this rabbi, he pulls me up this way. He says, I've gone to that Sefer, 2 or 3 times. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. Show me where that source is. Now, I've gone through it 25, 30 times at this point, so I know exactly where that source is. This takes me 2 seconds to find the page. And I found the page, right? And he looks at it, he reads it, and goes, wow. It's like, wow. It's like, you're right. He saw it, but he didn't see it. But he said, how do you know it's talking to me before 6,000? So I turned two more pages over, and it shows you, I realize it's a little vague, we'll get to it in a second, we said what I'm talking about. But he looks at it again, and he said, look, exactly what you said. Amazing. But that was the end of that. No more questions. I don't know how much time passed, maybe about a year. I was living I think Eretz Yisrael at the time, and I went back for what was called the Age-Up Conference. In those days, they still have it, I don't know because of Corona they have it, but the Age-Up Conference is the Association of Jewish Amish Professionals. It's like a think tank type of thing. They call together all the different organizations and do Kiruv, Rechokim, and they share all their methods and methodology and ideas to try to enhance the whole Kiruv process. It's a lot of fun. In the early days, it was actually paid almost nothing, stayed in a pretty good hotel, all at the inn. Food was fantastic. Then each year got a little bit less and less and less, but still it was a lot of fun, and you learned a lot. This time I'd gone purely just to try to sell some books. I was no longer involved with an organization per se. I went back there, and he was there again. And he pulls me over and goes, I apologize. Where was that source again? I mean, I was this person, big Talmid Chacham who knows a lot and learned under one of the greatest in our generation before he passed away. And how could he not remember where it was? How could he not know what it was? I had the Sefer with me because I never traveled without it for this very reason. Right? Went back up to my hotel room, got the Sefer, brought it back, showed me, and goes, well, I can't understand. I mean, it's like, there it is, right there. Right before my very eyes. And I walked away baffled. And I thought about it more and more, and I couldn't understand, how is it possible, like such an important source, if it was only the Zohar that's being quoted here, then I can understand. The Zohar is vast, the Zohar is vague. We don't all understand how to interpret the Zohar. The Zohar can say something that's clearly allegorical, and you for sure don't know what it's talking about. Or very Kabbalistic, and you have to know Kabbalah to break it down, to explain it, 100%. The tricky part is when you're looking at something in the Zohar that seems to be very simple. It seems to be exactly the way it sounds. But you still don't know, is it what it means to say, or is it something behind it? You don't know. So therefore, it's possible, especially if it's found in a more esoteric part of the Zohar, sounds a little bit contradictory that the Zohar itself is esoteric, but there are more esoteric parts inside the Zohar, right? And it seems like it's in there, buried, embedded in that section, so it can be missed. It can be missed, but even if you found it, and I would never have found it probably if I didn't have the Lashon to show it to me, then still you're going to wonder, is this what it means, what it's saying? The Zohar was written, officially was published in the 1300s, but it goes back to the Bayis Sheni, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and who knows? We know, was a prophecy, Rav Kodesh, there's all this suffix. doubts surrounding it. So it's very possible that if you're going to quote it, you're not going to have much credibility. What changes everything? When the Leshem does it. When the Leshem quotes it. When a modern day posting, a modern day gadol, a modern day Kabbalist comes along and says, yeah, what the Zohar is saying over here, you can take it word for word, literally the way it stands. When he says it, it's a different story. And because he wrote it down in his safe and he spoke about it, so I now have the liberty of being able to re-quote it and present it to you and talk about it and build and write books based upon it and even make some kind of prediction, not for Mashiach's arrival, but for how history might unfold over the next little while because of the fact that this has to be true. So somebody who sells that, one of my shiurim for many years and heard this material, and she wanted to find out for herself. So she actually she was going anyhow to Rabbi Pinchas Winston, and she had a shot to ask. And while she was there, because Rabbi Pinchas was the granddaughter of the Leshem. The granddaughter of the Leshem. Okay, so she asked. He said the Leshem says the following thing in a sefer. Can you take it to be true? And she simply said, if the Leshem said it, it's true. If the Leshem wrote it, you can take it as fact. And then she added, besides, my husband, with Chaim Knesset, right? That he's always talking about these things and saying it's, okay, enough is enough. Let me read the quote. It says the following thing. This is some background first of all. The Leshem, he starts off with a question. The question he starts off with is, are there going to be mitzvahs in Moshe Mashiach? It's a machlokas rishonim. It's actually a machlokas even in the Gemara. Will the mitzvahs be relevant in Yemot Mashiach? Why? Everything changes. There's no longer Yetzer Hara anymore, right? You have some poskim who say, no, the mitzvahs will no longer be applicable. They're only applicable, even though they're eternal, right? And you have others that say, yes, they will be applicable. So Leshem comes along, and he's machri, as he always does. He comes along and he provides the solution. Says, of course they'll be applicable. So what about the shittas that say they won't be applicable? No, you understand. A mitzvah is tzivui. Tzivui is something you have to be commanded to do. Right? When was the last time you commanded one of your children or grandchildren, eat that lollipop? Now, I command you. That sugary cereal that you love so much you can't wait to get your spoon into, it's a mitzvah. I want right now, eat that, right? And there's no not doing it. When was the last time you did that? You don't have to do that. When was the last time you had to be commanded to breathe or to eat? To eat healthy, that's a different story. But to eat, no commandments. Why? Because we don't need to be commanded. It's something we do naturally. It's something we like to do. Not everybody. Some people have a difficult time eating, and they have to be commanded to protect their health, basically. But for the most part, the things that we do as a function of our own teva, our nature, is not a commandment. Because you know why? Because the whole point of the mitzvah is to refine us, to make us like a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Because as the Ramchal points out, Derech Hashem, Olam Haba, the pleasure of Olam Haba is being one with Hashem. But you can only be one with Hashem if you're like Hashem. So we have mitzvahs in this world right now to make us like a Kodesh Baruch Hu as much as possible, so that when the time comes to go to the next world, we'll be more like a Kodesh Baruch Hu and we can receive His light. So the mitzvahs come to refine our actions. They come to create crises. That's what a mitzvah is a crisis. That's what it is, it's a crisis. It's 7 o'clock. My alarm has gone off. Millions in 15 minutes. I'm cutting it close, right? 15 minutes. And I gotta go. Now. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. You can sleep, but there's a minute at 8 o'clock. I checked before we left last night. Who are you talking to? There's a famous story of the Chafetz Chaim, who got up in the morning to daven Shachris early, right? Got up early, to daven Shachris, and he basically, he heard this voice that said, "You're an old man. After all these years, how much longer do you have to get up in the morning to daven? Surely you can sleep in at least once, twice." And his answer was, "If you're up this early, there's no reason why I shouldn't be up this early in the morning." And he have this actual dialogue with the Yetzer Hara? No. But that's what goes on inside all of us. I used to have a chavrusa when I was in Toronto. We went back to Toronto for a couple of years, and in Eretz Yisrael, the sun rises pretty early no matter what, all year round. It's earlier in the summertime, but in the wintertime it's still quite early. In Toronto, it can be 8 o'clock in the morning, still black, still dark, or very close to it. And I would have a chavrusa, and it'd be cold, much colder, right? And you didn't go to bed early the night before, and you had a chavrusa, and last time he didn't show up, so maybe you don't have to show up this time, and it's like taking a little revenge over here, or at least it's like, and your body's going sleep in, and you got to get up, The argument would go on so long inside my head, I had to get up because I just couldn't go back to sleep again anymore. I was like, yes, no, okay, forget it, get up right now. But it was late. Because we had the Sahara right now. And in order to be able to give us schar in the world to come, we have to have struggle. We have to be confronted by the Sahara so we can overcome it. That's what mitzvahs do. Mitzvahs create a confrontation between the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. Because you're being asked to do something that's counterintuitive sometimes, counter-instinctual is the proper term. Take a look at the world. How many people do mitzvahs for the good of their health? How many people do mitzvahs because they enjoy doing it, just period? And if they do, the Gemara says, Gadla mitzvah v'oseh v'eino mitzvah v'oseh. Right? It's better to be commanded and do the mitzvah than do it because you simply enjoy doing it. Because that's your thing, not God's thing anymore. So we have to be commanded. In the Moshe Mashiach, the Gemara says clearly, because Baruch Hu takes the Yetzer Hara, brings it before the Tzaddikim, before the Rishayim. This is kind of overlap with Eluzman, tonight's class. Unintentionally, but it fits it perfectly. Takes the Yetzer Hara and shechs it before the Tzaddikim and before the Rishayim. They both cry. The Gemara says the Tzaddikim cry and the Rishayim cry, but they cry for different reasons. Why they cry? Tzaddikim look and they see, wow, it's this towering thing, it's huge, it's monstrous. And they look at it and they say to themselves, how were we able to overcome this thing? It's amazing that we did. Oh, it's so scary to look at right now. Thank God we somehow survived it, because if I had it that big when I was going through life, I don't know if I would have been able to overcome it and do what has to be done. The Rishayim cry because it appears like a hair, like a little thread, a thread of hair. And they're going, aye, that's all it was? Just a little hair? That's what made me do this and there and that and there. It looked like a mountain during my life that I couldn't overcome. That's now. But in Yemot HaMashiach, Baruch Hu shechs the Yetzer Hara, and that's it, it's over. No more bechira, no more struggles, no more challenges, no more Yetzer Hara at that point in time. So therefore, every mitzvah that we do now as a mitzvah becomes a way of life. So when it says there's no mitzvahs in Yemot HaMashiach, it doesn't mean that because you would stop putting up tefillin and stop doing mitzvahs and stop lighting Shabbos and candles. No! But you won't have to be commanded to do it. You'll do it because it's the most natural thing. You'll want to do it. And that's the difference in the machlokas. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. The mitzvahs apply, not that they apply as mitzvahs, but the actions themselves are eternal. Tefillin, we won't be wearing black boxes in Olam Haba. But then again, the Zohar says when Yaakov Avinu took that stick and put it into the ground to multiply the sheep, right, when he's living with Lavan, he was yoked to the mitzvah of tefillin. So what did he do? He took a stick and wrapped it on his arm? How do you do that? How was he yoked? No, because tefillin is a concept. Shabbos candles are a concept. Shabbos is it's all concepts. There's different ways to teach these concepts. So the Leshem is going through this discussion and making these points, and then he gets to the discussion about Yemot HaMashiach itself. And he talks about how, and I actually have a source here, he says the following thing. V'hinei, Yiskayim HaTeva V'chumri V'kol HaAviyos D'chias HaMeisim Shuhu Lo Pechos M'Arba Shanei V'Achar Kilkalyos. Is this the one I want? No. Sorry. Here. It says, Acha Inin B'zeh. This is now the Hamshah, the continuation of this whole discussion I just mentioned before. He says, Ach in b'zehu kinei taluchas and hag asher b'yemos HaMashiach hinei hagiyeh b'tchila hateva v'nisim u'ur b'yachad. You have to know that at the beginning of Yemos HaMashiach, there's going the hanhaga, the way of the world, is going to be a mixture of miracle and nature. And the Rambam brings down that nothing's really going to change. Mashiach is going to come, the Yetzer Hara will be shafted, but still, you'll get up in the morning, you go to shul, you have to prepare food, you have to take care of yourself, you have to do all the things you do right now, but there'll be no Yetzer Hara. But don't expect all of a sudden everything's just going to magically fall in the sky. All the Gemaras and imply things you'll plant one seed and the whole field will grow. Right? But that's what the Rambam says, and that's what he's saying over here. There's a mixture of Teva and Nes at the same time. This is a very important point. Hold on to that one. Okay? It was going to say, and that's the way it was in Mitzrayim too. The exact same way. It was bizarre. We just take it for granted. We take so much for granted. We just read the story. Okay, that's the way it was. Can't argue with that. Torah says so. No, but you have to analyze what's going on. On one hand, you've got these fantastic miracles. You come home at the end of the day. They didn't stop working till Rosh Hashanah. The Makos began in Nisim. They did not stop working till the following 6 months later. So they were going to work. It wasn't as bad as it was before, because the Mitzrayim were preoccupied with all the disasters. But they were still going to work. They still had to punch the card, every single day. So they'd come home at the end of the day, sit down, make supper, and turn on the 11 o'clock news and see what's going on, in Mitzrayim. And there was blood in the river, and there's frogs all over the place, and there's keening, and it's like, there's coronavirus, and there's like this. But it's like one after the other. Their lives are normal, everything is like natural, and yet these phenomenally big miracles are taking place at the same time. Because it's right. Okay? He says, Shagam Reishi Sechalas Geula Hayateka Benisim. Even though there were miracles taking place in the very beginning, right? Im Kol Zeh Hinei Haya Adayin Chol Matzah Yisrael Esmam B'Teva B'Chomein. So there was the backdrop. It was the opposite today. Today the backdrop is one of nature. It's a natural world. There's miracles taking place. For example, the fact that we got the state back in 1940, huge miracle. The fact that we've been surviving 70 years against all the odds, huge miracles. The fact that we've been able to develop the country in spite of all the obstacles and opposition, huge miracles. But the overall backdrop has been nature, a natural world. UN, politics, governments, everything. Even the way we got the state back was through a vote of nations, right? There's a backdrop of Teva, but the miracles are taking, but there was the opposite. There the backdrop was miracles, because you have the Makos, you got Kodesh Baruch Hu talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu talking to the Jewish people, and talking to Paro, and do this, and that's the backdrop, but every single day they came home, and what's for supper? Well, we have to make it. You have to wash diapers. Even then. And he goes on to say, because the main change that had to happen to the Jewish people to make it that everything would change eventually did not take place until Mount Sinai, until the giving of Torah. Only then were the Jewish people, momentarily, it didn't last very long, but only then were the Jewish people able to reverse the Chet of Adam Rishon and return the world back from physicality, back to spirituality, back to ruchnis once again, when they said Nasa v'nishma. And at that point in time, if everything stayed the way it was, that was the beginning of Mashiach, and then the whole world, the whole Hanahaga would have been absolutely miraculous. Okay? So he goes on to say, okay, the Zohar talks about this as well. Agam she'hanhaga imahem b'nisim v'gedolim kozeh heim atzman hayu adayin lefi hatev legamrei. Even though it was big miracles, they themselves were all natural. V'chein yeh b'hamiyah rishonim he was a Mashiach. And since we're on the topic, let me point out to you that this is exactly the way it's going to be at the beginning of Yemos and Mashiach. The exact same way, right? Sheyad Geula b'Haga b'nisim gedolim. There'll be fantastically big miracles taking place in the world, and specifically for the Jewish people, okay? In Kozeh Teva Mishmeshes Gamke, but nonetheless, Teva will be the order, will be the natural order, okay? The Olam Kulo, the Chen Gabi Yisrael, but the Jewish, the world, including Jewish people, they'll still remain very gashmi, very physical. Why is this so important? Why does this point make a difference? I mean, it's instructive in terms of what it was like in Mitzrayim, but we don't think about it. We don't put ourselves back into the shoes. We're like people who walk into a movie at the end. I think the whole movie has to do with the end. It's like You walk in, you sit down, the last 5 minutes, and the hero is getting rid of all the bad guys, and everything's falling to place, and you figure out the whole thing. And no, that's not the way it was. That's just the end. We came at the good part. But there was a whole movement before that. There was a whole, consciousness before that. 4/5 died in Makas Choshech. Not in the first plague, not in the second plague, Makas Choshech. So close to the end. There was only one more market to go through. Only one more market that was going to open the door of Mitzrayim and let the Jewish people go out. One more. That's it. Just hang. You hung in there for 7, right? You hung in there for 8. Just one more, and then you'll see that Geula that Moshe Rabbeinu promised us on behalf of Kosh Baruch is going to happen in your lifetime. You'll go out. 12 million out of 15 million people couldn't hang on. And why not? Why not? Well, the Medrash brings down the fact that they were afraid they would lose their positions. They wanted to remain in Mitzrayim where they could control, because now anyhow Egypt was destroyed, so they could take over. They built it. There's all kinds of reasons, but ultimately speaking, they all pale. If you think this is God bringing you out, you see it happening. You see the miracles. This is the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and He's told you everybody has to go. It doesn't make a difference. Look, even Dasan Bavirim left. Weird. And the Erev Rav. Weird. And you should know there were a lot more Erev Rav than there were Jews. And the Erev Rav, as bad as they were, at the end, at the beginning, they weren't so bad. The Arizal brings down they were sincere converts. Moshe converted them because he really believed they could fit in. They lost it along the way. But they all left. What about the other 12 million? And this is the problem right here. This is the reason why. Because it was a combination of miracle and Tevet the same time. It's like you doubt. You're not sure. People don't realize Moshe Rabbeinu was walking the face of the earth for 79 years. The Gemara says that Miriam, at the age of 6, convinced her father to take back his wife, Yocheved, have another child. He's going to be the Moshiach. And when he was born and he gave off this fantastic light called the Or HaGanuz, Amram came and he kissed her on the head and said, "You're right, you're a prophetess. You saw you saw what was going to happen." And then they put him in the, put him in the basket of the river, give a little tap on the head. Now where's your prophecy? She never gave up. She stood by the river. She watched because she knew he was the Mashiach at that time, and hopefully for all of history. I mean, he is, by the way, for all of history. He comes back in every generation, and the final redemption will be through Moshe Rabbeinu. Not the body of Moshe Rabbeinu, but the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's Yedua. That's accepted. So he's definitely, not just for that generation, but for all generations. Ours too. Finished the job, he started. And she saw it. But for 79 years they had to wait. First he grows up in the house of Paro, ridiculous, absolutely bizarre and ridiculous, a nace beyond comprehension. How, it reminds me very much of what goes on in this country. How is it possible that we have a government with people who literally have sworn to kill us and wipe us off the face of the earth, are sitting there receiving money that's supposed to go to us instead to make votes against our government? How is it possible? Well, here's a precedent. Here's Moshe Rabbeinu, a Jew, a known Jew, growing up in the house of Paro. Right there. Does it make sense? No. But it happened. A nace. Nace Hashem Haisa Zos, he needless bein name. It's got to be from Kosh Baruch Hu, because this is wondrous and this is wondrous. So, he grows up, but he sees one of the Egyptians killing a fellow Jew, which, or he's beating him. He's not killing him. He's beating him. He's about to kill him. He wants to kill him. And it's Dasan Bavirim. Now you wonder if Moshe should just back off and do it anyhow, because until they die, they are a pain in the neck. Worse. But Moshe steps in. He kills the Mitzri with Hashem. Doesn't hit him, kills him, drops dead. Beautiful story there too, by the way. But that's another time to do with Geula. We won't talk about that right now. But that's what Moshe does. Moshe is forced to flee for his life. He runs away. He goes to a place called Cush. He becomes king for a while. He actually is engaged to the king's daughter. They never actually go through with the marriage, but he's forced to, eventually he leaves. He sets up the place. It's running smoothly. He moves on to Midian. Yisro recognizes his face in the post office, right? Puts him into a pit for 10 years because he's a wanted man. Yisro knows that Paro wants to kill him. He wants this person. So therefore he puts him into a pit. He figures if he can survive, then he's special. A little birdie comes along and feeds him, called Tzipora, right? Every day she feeds Moshe Rabbeinu. And you just go, wow, this guy survived for 10 years. Never caught on. Eventually they get married. Oh, you can't believe what's going on in Hashkach over here. I won't explain how, but I'll just tell you. Yisro is a reincarnation of Cain. Moshe is a reincarnation of Hevel. Cain killed Hevel because Hevel had 2 twin sisters and Cain only had one. In those days you married your sister, so you had to get along with your sisters for sure, okay? And you married your sister, and he only had one sister, he had one wife as opposed to 2, so therefore he killed Hevel for the second one. And Yisro is the reincarnation, and Tzipora is the reincarnation of the sister that Cain killed Hevel over. So when Yisro gave Moshe Tzipora, he was doing tikkun for Cain, giving back the twin sister he took way back at the beginning. That's how convoluted, how incredible Jewish history is, how world history is basically. And why you can't just look at the actors walking across the stage and doing their thing. Mr. Bennett has no idea, right, or any of these people, Lieberman, all these people in power today, as far as they're just the next politicians in line. But we're living in a very, very precarious period of history, a very biblical period of history. We're at the end of days. You don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You don't want to be the person doing the wrong thing at the wrong time now, because it may not just be you. You may be a Geula, somebody going back a long time who did exactly things like this, and you're supposed to fix it up, and you're doing the exact opposite. It's a very difficult time to just simply do politics, because you see what happens. Yisro, Moshe, all things, it's all going through history. Aaron. You know why Aaron is called Aaron? Because he has the name Haran inside his name. Because Aaron is a Geula of Haran. Who is Haran? That's the brother of Abraham. Abraham jumps in the fire, goes to the fire first, he survives. Haran says, well, if he survives, I'll go in and I'll prove my faith to God. And God, that doesn't work that way. You have to first believe and then the miracle happens, not the miracle. Right? So he jumps in and he dies because he was relying upon a miracle. Not the same thing. So the result brings down by Har Sinai, when they did the golden calf, even though Aaron was completely L'Shem Shemayim, by going ahead and trying to stall them, he was supposed to die like Hur instead. Aaron was supposed to give up his life instead at Har of this whole episode, and that would have been Haran's tikkun. I can go on the whole night like this. You cannot believe where all this goes and who's what, and people in David Melch's time, and this and the Tanaim, and we lost track today. But even in the Arizal's time, in the 1500s, he was still talking about these things, and still pointing out to people who they were from previous lifetimes. You have to be very careful about what you do and who you are, because you have no idea. If you take a role of prominence, probably you have a prominent role going back a long time. But that's not the point over here. That's the issue right now. Mir saw for 79 years. And you see, their miracles happened the whole way through. Rashi brings down, they came to kill Moshe. They took Moshe. It wasn't like he just ran away. They captured him. He was Chayav Misa. They wanted to kill him. What happened? They put his neck on the chopping block. The executioner took the sword. Boom! But it broke. Because at that moment in time, somehow, Moshe's neck turned into marble. So we look at that and say to ourselves, really? Mamish? Or was it more like like one of those little toy swords we buy our kids, the plastic ones, that then and he was trying to use that to get, it's not working. No, it turned to marble. Esav goes to bite Yaakov's neck when they meet, right? And he loses all of his teeth. He has to get dentures after. Because his neck turns to marble. How does it happen? It's a medrash. Yeah, midrash, we have it all backwards. Now Miriam, she saw it the whole way through. And then finally when he shows up, I mean, you see, and still it's not over yet. Moshe goes, we're going to go out. You have to believe. You get these miracles, right? We're with you. We're with you 100%. And Moshe goes, and Paro increases the slavery. It's so confusing that even Moshe Rabbeinu himself asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's going on? It's pshat. Ever since you sent me, it just got worse and worse, And this is the part that always blows me away. What you expect, Hashem is always such a bal rachamim. You expect him to say to Moshe, I hear where you're coming from. I understand. It's not easy. I realize I told you you wouldn't succeed, but I never told you you'd fail like this. I understand, but don't worry. It's okay. It's all going to work out. He doesn't say it to Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, like the Gemara says, the Kosh Baruch Hu says, Chaval. They don't make him like they used to make him. That's the Gemara. Chaval. They don't make him like they used to make him. Avram Avinu, I promise him the land. He has to bury his wife, and he has to buy the kever that belongs to him at top dollar from a Russia. And Yitzchak, with the wells, he digs one, they fill it up. There's another one, they fill it up. There's another, and he's got a son, Asa. Complain? No. Yaakov Avinu, he's on the run his entire life, Kimat. He finally settles down in Parshas Vayeshev. Finally settles down. And he has to get up again all over again. Down to Mitzrayim. Yeah, it was over. Complain no. They didn't even see Geula taking place. You're watching the Geula take place before your very eyes, Moshe Rabbeinu, and you're questioning and asking me my name? Right? Wrong. All going, what? Man, we know it's going to happen because we read the story before. Some people watch the movie, right? We know how it's going to unfold, right? So we're okay. We know this is going to pass. It's only a few psukim anyhow. For them, it was a bunch of years, and months. But we know, But Moshe Rabbeinu is like watching. How is this the Geula? Well, it is the Geula. That's what Kosh Baruch Hu is saying. You should have known this. He says to Moshe Rabbeinu. I can accept a lot of things, a lot of complaints. There's a lot of times Moshe Rabbeinu had something to say to his Baruch Hu, and his Baruch Hu said, I hear it, I understand, but not this. I told you this is redemption. I told you this is redemption. How it happens, how it works out, forget about the confusion. If I say it's happening, and you have to go with it. And even if it looks terrible, looks bad, it's the exact opposite of what you think it's supposed to be, doesn't make a difference. If I tell you it's happening. So there's no questions. Avram didn't ask. Yitzchak didn't ask. Yet they all understood it was all part of the process. All the bad stuff was all part of the process. And finally, the 15th of Nisan, they all go out and it all starts to fall into place. Even that didn't do the whole job. And you want to know if we're living in the Moshe Mashiach right now? People want to know, where's the Geula? We're staying by the front door for 10, 15 minutes having this discussion, just by the front door over here. And you're asking me, where is the Geula? You're standing, literally, your 2 feet are in the middle of it, at the end of it, at the end, not even the middle, long time ago. The end of it. And you want to know where it is? Tell me about it. Well, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know that's the end of it? Well, aside from some of the simanim we spoke about last time, and God will give a chance to speak about more in the future, but because of this. This is a game changer. This changes the whole story. It rewrites our whole pshat on the end of days. And the amazing thing is that it's so important and it's so crucial. Everybody should know this. Everyone should be speaking about it. Everyone should be taught this. Everyone should be thinking about it every single day. And almost nobody does. Almost nobody. So some people would like to say, well, that's the proof. It's not true. Because if it was true, wouldn't we all be speaking about that? Wouldn't it all be on the tip of our tongues? Are you kidding? No way. know how. Well, how do I know that? Because the Arizal brings down. And unfortunately, whatever, but I wrote a book called Drowning Pshat. Drowning in Pshat. What's Pshat? Pshat is the simplest, most obvious, not complicated, but simplest, most obvious explanation of something, but you can drown in it sometimes. Meaning that you can think that's all there is. We have to ask the question how so many people could get stuck in Europe. I don't just mean in the 1930s, I mean going back all the way hundreds of years even. And by the Romans, but why is it the last person really to leave exile on time and survive it pretty much was Yaakov Avinu. The last one. He was in exile for 36 years altogether. Okay, it was all said and done. He's living by loving for 20 years. And one day he picks up and boom, he's gone. Doesn't even say goodbye. Because every single day, he's living for redemption. It's his whole mindset is redemption. He's not settling in and investing in the place that he is. He's there because that's where he has to be to do his job. And he's waiting for God to tell him every single day for 20 years, when can I go? It's like, my mother used to take me shopping with her when I was a little kid. It was a nightmare for both of us in the end. I had to be bribed, and the bribes were worth it sometimes. But I remember there was one trip, went to New York. New York, right? And I was like this high, that's all, maybe a little higher, okay? And she dragged me from place to 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 place. I don't even know if she did actually, quite frankly, but I fetched the entire time. I kept literally wanting to sit down, go someplace else. When is it over? Every single second I was invested in, when is this thing going to end? When is this nightmare going to be over for me? She just the opposite for her. She didn't enjoy herself except for me. That mentality is how we're supposed to live in exile, even in Eretz Yisrael. But kol v'chomer in the diaspora, chutzlars. That's how Yaakov lived. Everybody else just settles down and invests and lose perspective in the situation. Over the last 40, 50 years, the rabbis from the pulpits, from the bimas, from the shtenders, wherever they stood to speak, every Shabbos should have been telling people, if not during the week, listen folks, we're settling down for the time being, but you have to know, as a nation, historically, everywhere we go, the exile comes to an end at some point. We always get caught off guard. We're always surprised. Do yourself a favor. Keep one foot in and one foot out. Doesn't make a difference how big and beautiful you build the yeshiva and the Beit Knesset, and how just, Beryl Wine talks about how he was sitting before he made it Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. He was still the Rav of a shul. And they sat down with a contract who was going to put skylights into they're doing renovations in the shul. Anyhow, they fly to Eretz Yisrael. So it's worth it. Right? And they're asking the committee, well, which ones do you want? The ones that last 200 years, or 100 years, or the ones that last 200 years? And he's thinking to himself, what are we talking about up here? We're living in America. 100 years, 30 years, we're not going to be for that long. It's not an issue for us. What do we do? We can't build like that. So he goes on to say the following thing. It's a continuation of what we said before. He says, he's talking about the Chis and Mason a bit, and he says, "V'hinei lechora haya nir lamar d'zman ichol shel kol osin shemusoi kodem atechia lo hiyeh shu b'kulam." He's talking about the Chis and Mason, resurrection of the dead. There are basically three periods of history. There is history since Ma'aseh Bereshis, not including Gan Eden before the Chet. There's history before Ma'aseh Bereshis. That takes us into Yemos Mashiach. Yemos Mashiach will go until 6,000. That's the other question you asked me yesterday. Is this 6,000 business not fixed? Or is like open-ended? Meaning, can this go on for thousands of years, or is that's like fixed? 6,000, it's fixed, very fixed. So there's until 6,000 begins Olam Haba, the first stage of the Ramchal points out, Olam Nefashos, where the souls get repaired, no damage, right? But within the period of time called the Yemos Mashiach, there are two periods. One is just Yemos Mashiach itself, which includes Kibbutz Galius, the gathering the exiles, includes Mashiach coming and getting the world all in order, enjoying the period of time without the Yetzer Hara. And then finally, the last stage is called Techis HaMesim until 6,000. Techis HaMesim is the resurrection of the dead. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. You have to believe Techis HaMesim. The Gemara says you can believe in everything else, and you don't believe Techis HaMesim, Ein Lehem Chelek L'Olam Haba. You have to believe in Techis HaMesim. The Lashon explains why, but it's a fundamental. Techis HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. What is it? Well, basically, it's your body being recreated anew, not Gilgulim. Gilgulim is your body is born normally from a mother, right, like every other baby, and your soul comes back from your previous life into that new body. Everybody here has been here probably dozens of times. That's why we're all so tired.
Rizal is full. Rizal is full time.
No. Big misconception.
Yeah.
You can have, well, if a person's a Rasha, they can reincarnate up to 4 times and then they get wiped away. But it says by anybody else, it could be even 1,000 times. Even 1,000 times. Certainly hundreds of times. And you just keep going until history runs out of time, basically. But for sure, everybody, there's nobody here that did it for the first time. We're all been, Gilgul. So then why do you need Techis HaMesim? Because, you see, we're still physical. Even though we reincarnate, same skin that I had in my previous body, not the same skin itself, but same texture, same physical properties, right? It's the same people all the way through, just different generations with different names and different parents. But yeah, I can't go to the world to come like this. The world to come is spiritual. This is too physical. Adam Marisha, when he was first created, was not created like this. This is what happened because of the chet of the Eitz Das Tova Ra. In order to go to the world to come, you have to go back to what he was before the chet, which means to go back to having skin made from light. Not physical skin like this. This is called the skin of the snake. It's a snake, he got us to do this and change ourselves. But we get back skin of light. If Adam Marisha was in the room today, you wouldn't see him. He'd be so ruchani. Your eyes wouldn't be able to perceive him. And that's why everybody has to go back before 6,000 so that you can go to the world to come. How do you get there? You just take an elevator, right? Someone just beams you up or something like that. It's like, how do you get there? Well, the world evolves. The entire world gets elevated with you inside of it. The whole world goes up. It becomes more ruchani. It goes back to what it was before the Chet of Adam Marisha. What would have happened at Har Sinai, the Jewish people had not been involved, or at least not, they'd stopped the golden calf. They didn't. But that's the way it is. So Techis HaMesim is that period of time at the end of Yemos HaMashiach. Now the lesson wants to know the following thing. How does it work? Right? Do we all drop dead at the same time? Everyone who's living, obviously people are dead. You don't have to worry about things like that. What about the people who are living? 12 o'clock, midnight, Techis HaMesim, boom, we're all gone. And then what? We all rot in the ground? And then after that we all come back? How does it work? So he says, right, in the beginning, it would seem that the time that we spend in the ground decomposing in order to be recreated once again like Adam before the Chet, right, will not be the same for everybody. The amount of time you spend in the ground to reincarnate, not to reincarnate, to decompose in order to come back in a new body, created from scratch, should not be the same for everybody, he said. That's the way it would seem to be. Everybody according to their spirituality, because the whole point of decomposing the ground is part of your tikkun for the gashmis. The more gashmi you are, the more time you have to decompose in the ground. That's why you hear these stories about tzaddikim who were dug up 100 years later, 20 years later, the bodies were still intact. I don't know how accurate that was, but it certainly theoretically makes sense. Because if they live their life free of gashmis, why should they decompose in the end? That's what it's for, And that's going to be, dependent upon where you're holding in this world right now. The more material you are, the more time you spend on the ground. That's what it says. Okay? Aval, lefi hanusach echer, according to Zohar elsewhere, shekasut b'Zohar haniskar v'yikam lo miyad. It says everyone gets up immediately. Right, no, it seems that in the end they were all going to decompose in the ground for the same amount of time. It doesn't make a difference where you were holding. That's good news, right? Although I'm not sure you're conscious of this anyhow, but at least, it's not going to be like an onish. We're not finished yet. He goes, "Harei mashma," okay? There's a catch. Yes. The amount of time that everyone spends in the ground is the same. Yes. The decomposition period of time is the same for everybody. But what changes is the day you're going to die. And therefore the day you resurrect. So everyone spends, let's say, 6 months in the ground. But if you die this year, right, assuming it's Techis Alisim already, you come back 6 months later. If you die 5 years from now, there'll be people coming back, thank you, people coming back already who resurrected, right, while you are still not resurrected. So you're going to look at your window, right, talk about keeping up with the Schwartzes, okay? You look at your window and you're going to see them flying around like angels. They look like angels. Everybody who came back ready to Chizim would look like angels. And you have this body of mine is just so heavy and weighs me. You take the bus and they just fly. Because they've already resurrected, they come back. He says, therefore, because of the fact that the day of death is different, likewise the day of resurrection will also be different. Right? Like anybody who purified themselves, rectified themselves in this lifetime, they will die earlier and they will come back earlier. That's what he says. This is all not incidental, but it's like we're moving towards the climax. This is just a informational point along the way. Okay? So he says, because the whole point of death at that time will be, right? Rak la'akel es kol chumris. The point of dying then will only be to dissolve the physicality so we can get back spiritual. To transform your body. Okay? That's what it says. To make you brand new. To bring you back and make you brand new. Okay? Now here he says, so, in conclusion, the amount of time from the time of death until the time of resurrection is the same for everybody, yes. But the time of death would not be the same for everybody. You follow? Everyone gets that difference? Okay? It says, so now, where you might have had, let's say, a young period of time, right, where let's say when everyone died at the same time, and everybody spends the same amount of time in the ground, and that time is six months. So the entire period of Techis Amazing is 6 months, because we're all dying at the same time, we're all coming back at the same time, and it all takes the same amount of time to decompose. But the moment you say that the day of death is going to vary from person to person, now the period expands. It gets longer. Okay? So he says, first of all, he says, tzaddikim will come back first. Right? And he said there'll be many, the period of time will be very long. Ach tzaddikim asher meisu kavar hein yukum harishon. The people who've already they've already died, tzaddikim who died in the past, they're no longer living today, they of course will come back right away because they've already decomposed anyhow. Or they're already gone through their tikkun. Should take of achru arbin shel kibbutz galios. It will occur after 40 years from kibbutz galios. Yeah, you have to appreciate. The first time I read this, and I'm going through this, and I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea what this means. It's the first until now. Before I had got to this point where I saw this material, I had learned the Ramchal, Derech Hashem, who speaks about Techis Amazing. And Derech Hashem, Techis Amazing takes place in year 7,000, already in the world to come, which makes sense. Because you go to the world to come, the body and soul get separate, the body gets fixed up, the soul gets fixed up, you get brought back together again in 7,000 for some kind of Techis Amazing, not really physical, so it's not really Techis Amazing, but kind of a Techis Amazing at 7,000, they're judging the whole thing. That was my understanding. And then I get these words the first time, going back to 25 years, right? He says, 40 years from Kibbutz Galios. Kibbutz Galios. That's not in Alom Haba. That's not an Alom Haba. There's no Kibbutz Galios in Alom Haba. There's not even Kibbutz Galios in Techis Amazing. right? So what are we talking about? And he says, he goes on to say, right, she'az yeh techiyah harishona. That's when the first techiyah is going to begin. Really? After 40 years from Kibbutz Galios? Like we're in Kibbutz Galios. The Torah talks about Kibbutz Galios. We're waiting for the end of Kibbutz Galios. We're here, all of us right now. We are Galios that we're gathered in. We came from Chutz La'aretz, different places. They're still coming, right? It's been going on for hundreds of years since the Gra first woke up. Well, he didn't wake up; he was always up. But the Zohar told him the 5500 was the time to begin the process, and he did. And here we are today as part of the hemshech of that process, and that's the final stage before Yibas Mashiach. So the Chis HaMeisim begins from 40 years after Kibbutz Galios. Well, first of all, it's been going for a long time. What do you mean after? Okay, but that changes everything. He doesn't say. Adds another very important detail. He says, and on top of all that, the az yumshach zman kol techiyas ad techiyah achrona hemshech. Drum roll, please. Right? It's going to last a long time. This period of Chis HaMeisim, post Mashiach. Post Mashiach. There's no need for Mashiach and Chis HaMeisim. So it's all fixed up. It's useless. Chis HaMeisim is just it's like the great rectification of mankind that's still surviving in preparation for the world to come. Mashiach has long gone, done his thing. 40 years after Kibbutz Galios, and this period is going to last how long? He says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, 210 years. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, 214 years. We shall, whoa! Throwing things up in the air, celebrating, so thank you. Why? Isn't this a calculation from Mashiach's arrival? No, it's not a calculation from Mashiach's arrival. We didn't calculate Mashiach's arrival. I have no idea how to even do that. I know where it says you can do it. I know where it tells you if you understand this, you'll be able to do it. But I have no idea how to use the information. This very day, I have no idea how to calculate. I'd like to know, I think, okay? I'd probably still the beans, so probably better I don't know, right? But it's not a calculation for Mashiach's arrival. But it is a calculation for Mashiach's end, meaning of his tafkid. So it's like someone says to you, what time is Shlomo going to show up? I need to know what time to put the food on. And you say, I have no idea. He's caught in traffic somewhere. But I know one thing for sure, he has to leave by 7. That's for sure. He told me. He's got a shear at 8 o'clock at night, takes him half an hour to get home. He must leave by 7 to be on time. And he's always on time. So I don't know when to tell you to put the steaks on the barbecue or whatever you're going to do, but I know one thing for sure. Whatever you're going to give him, it has to be ready to be eaten at least by 6:30, if not earlier. Because by 7 he's out of here. That's a fact. As much of a fact can be in advance. And that even is a little bit tricky because human beings are fallible, there's all kinds of unknowns. But this is God. We're dealing with God. And the Zohar says that within 210 years, right, to 214 years, that's the period of Chis HaMeisim, and Mashiach has to have been come and done his thing and be finished by then. Finished. So if I'm reading to this to you 500 years ago, it'd be interesting, but that's all. Because 210 years to 214, what's 3 years between, a lot actually in history, but nonetheless, there's still 500 years left to go. 500 years left to go, it could be anywhere in that 500. If it's 1,000 years ago, right? Rabbi Shimbai, he knew the Zohar. He wrote the Zohar. People, Moshe DeLeon, who published it, they knew this. They knew this information, but they couldn't do anything with it because they still had 1,000 years left to go, or 1,500 years left to go, or 500 years left to go. When did everything change? In 1986, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, and 1990 according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's 210 years after Chesed Mesing, no Mashiach, he's gone, followed from 40 years of Kibbutz Galius. So 210 plus 40 is 250. Once you're inside the 250 range of years, there's nothing else left. By definition, you have to be in the Mashiach. You have to be. Or 214, even earlier, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, because he says 214 plus the 40. He agrees with the 40, but he says 214. It's based upon Psukim and Kabbalah, things like that. It's right there, the Zohar, Medrash Ne'elam, that's where it comes from. And as of 1986, you're at the 254 point, which means, by definition, there's no time left. You're now in the 40 years of the Kibbutz Galius, you must have Mashiach period of time, and in 40 years' time, the Chesed Mesing has to begin. When I first did this, there was like 25, 30 years left. Now we're down to 4 to 8 years. In 4 years' time, it's going to be 5786, as of this Rosh Hashanah, B'ezras Hashem. 4 years. From 5782 to 5786, that's, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, that's when the 40 years ends. Because it begins in 1986, which is 5746. 40 years is 5786. That's the 40 years of Kibbutz Galius, which includes Mashiach.
1986 of 6,000 years?
No, on the Goyish calendar. 5746.
So I'm confused.
5746. I just use because that's the common date we use. 5746 corresponds to 1986. So as of 5746, that would begin the 40 years that would end in 5786, which is 4 years from now, when according to Yitzchak, the Chesed Mesing has to begin. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the period would begin in 1990, right? And last 40 years till 5750, till 5790, when the 210 years is going to begin. Okay? 4 to 8 years. When Rabbi Tzvinovsky was asked, can we take this literally? She said, yes. If the Leshem said it, it's literal. You can't, someone can argue all they want. I don't hold to that. I don't believe it. Who knows what he's talking about? Who knows what he meant? It's the Zohar. Fine, the Seder. A person can argue and say whatever they want. They can have, I mean, you know cognitive dissonance is, right? You've heard the term cognitive dissonance? I mean, it's everywhere. And all over the place, to do with health, and to do with the government, and to do with this thing, to do with that thing, and the virus, and the vaccine. It's we live with so much cognitive dissonance. When people hear something that goes against their known reality that they refuse to give up, they will ignore the other side, no matter how truthful it is. Amen. That's how 6 million people, 13 million people in Europe get stuck. That's how people in Buffalo get stuck. We make a big deal about Talmud Bavli and all the Surah and Papadisa and all that, but the Zohar says that after the miracle of Mordechai and Esther and Purim, it says the wellsprings of Chachma opened up in Shemayim to give us the light we require to bring the redemption then, now. And Ezra Sofar, he can't talk against it, but he stayed in Galus because his Rebbe was still there. So he stayed to learn because others stayed, and the Zohar says those wellsprings closed up and they will not open again until the final generation. Because we blew it. Because we had the opportunity. Cyrus, Koresh, he says to the Jewish people, I'm giving you permission to go back and to build the base of Mikdash. It's bizarre. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't happen. The Persian Babel, they destroyed the base of Mikdash because the base of Mikdash was antithetical to the rest of the world. And a Persian king comes along, go ahead, build it. What do I care? Well, I do, and you should. And 42,000 people show up. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, according to the Gra, according to the Ramchal, that's it, folks. Now you have to face Haman. 18 more years. That was 52 years. That could have been Achishem. That's what it was supposed to be. When Koresh said, the Gemara calls him Mashiach ben Yosef. Well, he's not really, but he acts like it kind of in that position. Kosh Baruch Hu has hardly shlich l'makom. Kosh Baruch Hu has many messengers. 42,000 people show up. They're all the rest staying home and learning, doing all different things, and the wellsprings close up. Well, what do you do? Maybe learn, maybe change things. I don't know. When I take it all into account and I put it all together, and even for myself, who I've been over this material so many times, I've taught it. I mean, probably why the room is only half empty or half full as you look at it. People, how many times can you hear this stuff? And yet every time I give it over, it just gets stronger in me. I just get more chizuk. I just get built up by it. I just get more of a believer. But I also get more frustrated too. Because you got this information, this life-saving information. You got a Jewish Hizkish Baruch Hu Zachor Es Yimas Olam. Learn! Take a look at the past. That's how I talk to you. We don't have prophets today. But I left behind so many clues and so many sources and so many people and so many... Just like, listen. Push away the cognitive dissonance. Forget about the rest of the world. I'm going to leave with a vort for tonight. I don't know where we'll go from this point, okay? But I'll leave with a vort. Tied to this, tied to Rosh Hashanah. It's Elul's month. Rosh Hashanah's coming out very fast. Three Gemaras. In the Gemara called Avodah Zarah. Interesting Gemaras. The first was talking about a Roman. He's a Roman officer in the government. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Yud on the base, and it says that the Caesar, I'm not really sure if the Caesar means a Caesar, just a politician, but Caesar turns to his cabinet and says, the Jews are bugging me, and I want to get rid of them. But he does it as the derech mashal. He says, what do you do if a person, let's say, gets a leg that's gangrene, God forbid, it gets diseased? What do you do with the leg? You have to cut it off to save the rest of the body. So he wants to say, we have to get rid of the Jews, to cut them off, destroy them. There's a Roman in the cabinet. He says, you can't do it. You can't do it for two reasons. Number one, you can't do it because if we do that, they're going to call us a killing empire. Anybody who goes ahead and starts wiping out the whole nation, get a terrible reputation, and will be despise the whole world. We don't want that. The Romans didn't want that. They weren't interested in that. They wanted tax money. That was their main thing. Money. They wanted the people to be happy, so they paid taxes. So the Caesar says to this Shalom B'Katia, he says, you know something? You're right. Oh, he brings up the second reason. He brings up a verse. The verse says that they touch the verse, and he says the same way the world can't survive without the four winds, the world can't survive without the Jewish people. So therefore, you can't destroy the Jewish people. I think there's two reasons to give why you can't destroy them. The Roman Caesar, whatever, he agrees, and he says, fine, you're right. But the Romans had this very strange law, that you can disagree and be right, but since you disagreed, you're chayav misa. So he said, you're right, it makes sense, and I'm going to follow your advice, but I have to kill you. No. So they're taking him out to be killed, to be executed as a Roman, and there's this matronisa, this woman, I don't know who she is, what she's doing there, obviously Shkacha Pratis. She says to Shalom Katia as he's being taken out, Chaval, that the ship has arrived at the harbor but has no tax money to pay. Get it? She's saying to him, you're dying as a Jew, but you're not a Jew. You won't go to the world to come. You're literally dying on behalf of Klal Yisrael, and you're not going to go to the world to come. So he immediately falls upon himself, does bris milah, converts on the spot, through the fire and all that, he dies, and he becomes a Jew in the process, and he gives half his money to, or all of his money to Rabbi Kiva, B'Chevarav, and all that. He dies a complete hero, marred the whole thing. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yuhanasi, Rabbi heard the story, Ubacha, and he cried. And he cried. Why did he cry? Yesh mi shekayna olamo achrei kama shanim, v'yesh mi shekayna olamo achrei shas achas. Which literally means there are some people who acquire their world, being the world to come, after a whole life, after many years of Mesiras Nefesh Torah mitzvahs. And there's some people like this guy who just died at the moment and is going to the world to come because the bus call came out and said he's going to the world to come. He died, I left that part out, important detail, right? But a bus call came out and said the Ketib and Shalom is going, Shalom and Ketib is going to the world to come. So that's what Rabbi cries in the middle of the thing. And that's what Rabbi says. Rabbi says that you can a whole lifetime try to be, a ben olam haba, and yet in one moment a person earns the scar of the world to come. And he cries. Doesn't say why he cried, but that's what it says, okay? 7 pages later, there's another story about the famous Elazar ben Dudaya. We won't go into his history and past, but he wasn't a good dude, as they say. He wasn't doing the right thing. He was avarim. He was doing averas. And as Hashgacha Pratis would have it, in the midst of an avera, he hears, this something, and it says to him that the same way that this wind has passed, right, the wind is blowing through and won't stay, likewise, Elazar ben Dudaya is not going to the world to come. Well, that shook him up. After all these years of doing averas, I guess he always felt he'd always make amends and fix things up. All of a sudden it hit him, he's in trouble. So the Gemara goes and says, he turned to the sun and the moon and the stars and says, you got to pray for me so I get to the world to come, do tshuva, right? And they say, we pray for you. They bring Pesukim down, because in those days the sun, the moon, and the stars were very educated. They learned Nach, right? And they knew all this Pesukim, right? And they would say things like, we can't do that because it says over here that we're going to be renewed. So we got our own problems to worry about over here. Get yourself another person, another creation to down on your behalf. So he turns to the mountains, the hills, same thing. They bring their own Pesukim down also because they also learned the Chavrusa, probably, right? And we can't do it. So finally, after a whole long, story, Elazar ben Dudaya says, I see it depends upon me. Nobody can save my soul but me. So he davens, does tshuva, he does such tshuva, such intense tshuva, he dies in the process. And a bus quote goes out and says, Rabbi Elazar ben Dudaya is muchan ba'olam haba. Something to that effect. And here's Rabbi once again, crying again, right? The Bachan Rabbi cries and says, Yesh misha kolamot b'shas achaz yidkulav shikabah shanim. That's what he says. Third story, 1 page over. Famous story, one of the 10 martyrs, Rabbi Chanina ben Teradzi, right? He's being executed. Why? Because he was teaching Torah B'Rabbim. The Romans said you cannot teach Torah B'Rabbim, and he was doing it anyhow. Got caught, they wrapped the Sefer Torah around him, put tufts of wool on his chest so he would burn slowly and suffer for it, because the Romans loved to make an example of people, so they made sure they suffered terribly so people would see it's not worth it. That was the whole idea. Crucifixion, the thing with the cross, right, was one of the main ways they did it because it was terrible to die, and that's what they did, right? But he was being burned to death with Sefer Torah. So, as this is going on, right, the story goes that Bruria, which is his daughter, sees her father dying like this, and she's crying, and he says, don't feel so bad. He said, if it was only me dying over here, it'd be one thing. But the Sefer Torah is being burned as well. So the same God who will avenge the busha, the disgrace of the Sefer Torah, will also avenge me as well. But not that was her concern, quite frankly, but that's what he said. These stories have so much built into them. You have to look at what's going behind the scenes, but that's the pshat, okay? Then his Talmidim come over to him, right? And they say to him, Rebbe, what do you see? What do I see? I'm burning to death over here with the Sefer Torah. You know what the view's like? What do you mean, what do I see? But he's not bothered by this. He answers the question. He says, I see parchment burning, but Osius flying back to Shemayim. Meaning you can burn, the physical, but you can't kill the spiritual. They're just freeing me. Just like the Sefer Torah, Osius are eternal, likewise my soul. I'm going to go to Shemayim, don't worry. I'm okay. Now, here's the funny part. If you can call it a funny part, right? But here's the unusual part. There's this Roman executioner watching this whole thing take place. And, assumedly, he was one of the lowest of the lowest. I mean, who becomes an executioner and kills people, murders people on behalf of the government? You have to have some kind of taste for it, kind of like for it. So you have to assume he's kind of low in the totem pole of spirituality, right? But he's watching this thing take place, and he says, what the heck is going on over here? Like, these guys are, he's burned to death, and they're having like a coffee break over here. Like, they're talking about things that have nothing to do, and he's like calmly answering the questions. Like, there's only two possibilities. Either these people are nuts, like literally, they're like Mishugayim completely, and they need to be hospitalized, right? Or they really believe this is the truth. Because no one can go this far. I've executed lots of people, and they all crack. They all crack in the end. There's stories upon stories of people who totally abandon their faith. But not these people. They're holding on to it. They're going with it, they're holding on. And he's so impressed that he turns to Rabbi Pinchas Winston, who already was offered, the students say, open your mouth, let the fire burn you faster so you die quicker. He says, no, God gave my soul. I mean, the heroics are unbelievable. Just unbelievable. These stories I never get tired of these stories ever. They just like really just put it in perspective for everybody. But this executioner says, he says, tell me, if I take the wool off your chest, if I allow this to happen more quickly, will you promise to take to the world to come? And this is a promise. And he promises. And he takes the wool off his chest, and he burns to death faster, and the executioner jumps in as well and dies on the spot. And the gospel comes out and says that both the Ezra, and the executioner are going to the world to come. Guess who cries again? Right? Rebbe cries. And he says, Yesh mishakolamu achar kama shamim, yesh mishakolamu achar shas. And that's the last year of these Gemaras. That's it. It's over. No more Gemaras like this. Now, the truth is that there's a lot of questions to be asked, but no one seems to ask them. First of all, why is Rebbe crying? What's he crying about? So on the surface of it, for many years, I thought, I couldn't believe this is what he was crying about, but I thought that it sounded like he was saying that here I am working my entire life to be a good, frum yid, do all the mitzvahs properly, that I'm serious nefesh, right? And I still don't know if I'm going to the world to come. And this guy spends his entire life, especially in his entire life, not even doing Torah mitzvahs, does one act of a serious nefesh, and boom, gets up his cake and eat it too. He's going to the world to come. Is that not frustrating to you and me? Rabbi Geula Nasi? That's his taina? That's his taina? He's complaining because I have to work a whole lifetime to accomplish what he does in one moment? That's his taina? No, that's not his taina. His taina is completely different. His taina is saying the following thing. He's saying, wow, I spent my entire life sitting with Baruch Hu. Mira, no regrets, of course, none whatsoever. Even with the suffering he went through, no regrets. I would do it all over again, 10 times over. That's what we're here for. There's no more meaning in life but the Torah mitzvahs. But until these people came along, I never realized how powerful a single moment of tshuva could be. I mean, I knew it was powerful, but this is really powerful. And if I had known this all those other years, I was being Moshe Nefesh, I would have been more Moshe Nefesh. Like someone who, realizes, he studies for the exam, he tries hard, he works hard, and does the work, and then gets the exam, and he realizes, something, if I had known the exam was going to be this easy, I would have studied twice as much. Why? Because I realized now I saw that information, but I thought it'd be so difficult, so interesting. But now that I see it, I kind of learn, what a waste. Because whatever I accomplish, it's a fraction of what I could have accomplished in the end. Because the power of a moment, a single moment. But there's more to the story than this. And it's Geula Chazal. And the Chazal is just you can't, there's no way to describe it. The genius, the chachma, the only explanation is Ruach HaKodesh. That's no explanation. Because how could people be so subtle and teach so much with so little? And the truth is, the first 10 times I saw these Gemaras, it never occurred to me until 1 year. Because I happened to be fortunate enough to see them all in one day, all in one sitting, all in one session. And because of that, I was able to notice one little nuance of difference that teaches you unbelievable insights about being Jewish, from Torah, Tshuva, Roshah, the whole thing, life. And what is it? The first and third statements of Rebbe differ from the second one. You see this? You didn't notice it before? I said it very quickly so you wouldn't notice. Okay? But the first statement, the first time Rebbe says this thing and he cries, he says, Yesh mi shekana olamo achrei kama shanim, ve'yesh mi shekana achrei sha'achas. Sha'achas. The same thing he says by the third one, by the executioner. But the second one he says differently. He reverses it. Yesh mi shekana olamo achrei sha'achas, ve'yesh mi shekana achrei kama shanim. Reverses the order. So, I looked. I just looked all over it, looking for an answer. Why the change? Couldn't find anything. Not yet. So looking by it, but So of course, the first thing you do is you look at the difference. You look at the difference. What's unique about the second case is not true about the first and third case. That they would switch it around like that. Well, the first and third case are talking about Gentiles who convert. The second case is talking about a Jew who did tshuva. So what? Oh, now you got the Gemara. The Gemara in Yuma that says the following thing. It says somebody who does tshuva mihira, does tshuva out of fear, right? They'll do tshuva. It counts as tshuva. They still have to fix it for their averas. We have Yom Kippur for that, right? You do, but their tshuva counts, but they still have to do, have kapara. But, says the Gemara, a remarkable concept, absolute mind-boggling concept. The Gemara says, but somebody who does tshuva me'ahava not only gets the tshuva for the averis, but the averis become zchuyot. They actually become mitzvahs. Now you can't plan for this, obviously. You can't go and do it purposely because the Gemara says you do that, it won't count. It has to be that you thought, like he did it, okay? Second of all, they call him Rebbe. Rebbe says not only is he forgiven and goes to the company, even got the time. I had to go through for years for the smicha program. He got it at the moment of death. He was called Rebbe because he died the way he died, teaching us this important lesson. So why? Why is it? Why is it that a person who does tshuva mihira versus tshuva mi'ahava changes the whole thing? Because when a person does tshuva out of fear, it doesn't mean they've changed their mind. It doesn't mean they've changed their mabat, their outlook. It just means they're worried about the consequences. I better fix things up. I'm going to do the same thing next year anyhow, right? But in the meantime, here comes Rosh Hashanah, to be a kippur, Yom Adin, I got to convince the base that I'm sincere. I'll do tshuva. Because I'm worried if I don't do tshuva, I'll be in trouble. So I haven't moved into the same page as the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I just didn't want to, be different. When someone does tshuva mi'ahava, right, they're saying, I buy into Kodesh Baruch Hu's worldview. I buy into his plan for my situations. I'm on the same page as the Kodesh Baruch Hu. In fact, not only that, but because I love the Kodesh Baruch Hu so much, because I'm so with him, I so want to be one with him, that if I could go back and undo all those averas I did back then, I did them out of confusion. If I had the love of Hashem I had back then, I wouldn't have done it. I just didn't know, but now that I know, so Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you know what? That's true. And because of that, I will look at it not only as if you didn't do the averas, but they become the mitzvah because that's what you would have done from the ahava. So Elazar ben Dordaya, he does tshuva me'ahava. Not he wakes up because of the yira, but it has to be, he doesn't begin because of the ahava. And that's why the Gemara and Chazal switch it around. Because they're saying that only did he acquire his olam haba in one moment, but he even was able to acquire with all the kamashudim as well. As opposed to the converts, but became like new people, as if they're starting from scratch at that moment in time. Whatever they did in the past doesn't count anymore. Doesn't hurt. It doesn't count. It's not going to be a mitzvah for them. We are at the end of history. I can't tell you enough how true that is. It's hard to believe after thousands of years of waiting. It's hard to believe because we're trained to think like this. It's hard to believe because so much seems to be going on that would somehow imply just the opposite if you don't know the rules. Every single moment counts. Mamash counts at this point in time. How you use your time now, more than ever in your entire life. There's going to come a time very soon, faster than you will know. One of the lessons of the Twin Towers, one of the lessons of the coronavirus, just a hemshech of the first one, was to teach us how fast Hashem can change history. You think you have time to make things up? You think you're trying to change things? How many Jews thought there would be time to leave Europe? How many Jews think there's time to leave America? Because there'll always be time. To fix it. Always be. No. Just on the spot. Just changes like that. We'll have the Bechira one day, and the next day it's gone. And with that, the chance to inspire Haba, the chance to make a difference, the chance to change yourselves and change the world, whatever change, but to make an impact, to do something meaningful. One day yes, one day no. Rebbe cried because he realized all those moments that he was taking seriously. Okay? He was using unbelievably, but he thought there was more. That he had more. I can't say that about him, but he can. But I can say about myself, and you can say about yourselves. Yeah. This Rosh Hashanah is not like the others. It's different. Just like last one was also different, but it's getting more different each time. Because you see what's going in history. Kodesh Baruch Hu is like me. Well, that was going to be the last story, but I'll finish up this story. This is a famous story, probably heard it 1,000 times, but it really sums it up in one fell swoop. Famous story, Shimon Schwab went to visit the Chafetz Chaim. He was going to America at a time that America was called Midbar. It was a wasteland, spiritual wasteland, a desert. So he went to the Chafetz Chaim to get a brocha to survive in America, and he stayed for Shabbos. And the Chafetz Chaim, at some point in time, turned to him and said to him, instead of a bracha, he said, why aren't you a Kohen? The Chafetz Chaim's a Kohen, but he asked him, why aren't you a Kohen? A little unusual question, but maybe the Chafetz Chaim didn't remember to know, whatever, My father wasn't a Kohen. You know the story? You all know the story? Right? My father wasn't a Kohen. So he says to him, so why wasn't your father a Kohen? Now it's getting strange, right? Because if my father, because his father wasn't a Kohen. Okay, but why wasn't your grandfather a Kohen? At this point in time, Shimon Schwab was very young at the time, very young still, Talmid Chacham, but very young. He realized the question that was being asked was not the one he thought was being asked. He says, I don't know. He says, because back at Mount Sinai, when the Kodesh Baruch Hu said to the Jewish people after the Egel Zahav, Mi Hashem Elai, the Bechor didn't come. Levium, they came, but not the Bechor. And because of that, they lost the right to the kahuna. And that's why your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, all the way back to Hashem, that's why you're not Kohanim. You're going to America, next time Hashem says to you, me, Hashem Elai, make sure you answer the call. Make sure you answer. So I understand that to me, that he saw, because he did, what was going to happen eventually. Because every galus comes to an end, by definition. And every galus does the exact same thing. It pushes people this direction or this direction. We sat on the fence for decades. We were able to do it. You could do it because it was possible. But not anymore. When a galus comes to an end, the Baruch Hu wants to know who's with me and who's not. And you prove that every moment of your day. It's tough. It's a lot of pressure. Who can live up to a statement like that? But at least think about it. At least let it cross your mind. At least realize the potential of the moment. And through that, we accomplish great things. And who knows how much of a schus that is for the rest of Klal Yisrael who was asleep. Mordechai and Esther engineered an entire Geula while the rest of the nation slept. That's what Haman told Achashverosh. You don't have to worry about them. They're asleep. They're God's asleep. Fortunately, Mordechai and Esther were not. And the Ner Schus, they saved the entire nation. That's our job.
Do you want to take any questions?
Any questions? Why did I go so long?
Keep going.
You started.
My question is, how does this Rosh Hashanah, Shemitah coming up, how does that play into? I think the Gemara says Mote.
Sanhedrin, Sari Zayd, Amud Aleph.
Just repeat the question.
Right? How it's Shemitah? Shvius is a very the Gemara lays out the whole redemption process according to a Shemitah cycle, according to a 7-year Shemitah cycle. And the last of the Gemara says, well, not the last of the Gemara says that the Shemitah year itself is supposed to be the year of Gog and Magog, the war of Gog and Magog, and Moshe Shvius is Mashiach, the David is supposed to come. Kolos in the 6th year. In other words, talk of Mashiach's arrival, Rashi says, is Kolos, right, in the 6th year. Who was talking about it? The 7th year you have, the war of Gog and Magog if it's necessary, whatever level is necessary. And then the 8th year Mashiach is supposed to come. So yeah, Shemitah, every time Shemitah comes along, it's a very, it's like walking in eggshells a little bit. It's like a very powerful symbol of history. And a person could argue, well, we don't exactly know if it's really the Shemitah year, but it doesn't make a difference. Of course, we see by Rosh Chodesh. Kodesh Baruch Hu, he goes by Ar Cheshbonos. So that's what Hashgacha Pratis has decided is the year for Shemitah, you go with it. And the halachas. Yeah. Any question?
I'm going to have to watch the video again. But I believe you started by suggesting that there's a greater mitzvah when you commanded it.
Not suggesting, that's what the Gemara says.
Okay. And then you came full circle around. Maybe I misunderstood. And you said that the deed was done by their choice. Almost a...
Not sure you're referring to the second year. What was the second year referring to?
I think it was what you said when he was burning. And here's this guy got saved. Took you 12 years and he became a rabbi. And he took away his and he did it because it was his own choice.
No, the choice, the mitzvah is the mitzvah. The schar is for making the choice to do the mitzvah. But he did the tshuva because he was commanded to do it. And now you're supposed to use your free will to fulfill that. That's the whole schar. The whole schar is that you're choosing to do that which is counter-instinctual. And you see, his whole life was one of Averis.
So he chose to do it,
right,
and that had merit. And then you started by saying, I'm not. What do you call it? I'm not criticizing you.
No, it's okay.
But you started off. Say at the bit. I know that. I got that. And then when he's burning, he instinctually chose to do what he was.
No, he didn't instinctually choose. On the contrary, that's the point I was making. Everybody else would scream in agony at that time. Everybody else would scream, free me, mercy. He would scream, that's the instinctual response. His controlled free will response was, I'm going to go with dignity. I'm going to be a Kiddush Hashem. I'm going to melt this for every single aspect of Kiddush Hashem I can possibly do, and that took a supreme act of will. That's gadlus. That's when you earn your schar. And a person does that. I don't feel like getting up on time for minyan, but you know something? I am going to get out of bed anyhow, in spite of the fact that it seems like there's a 40-pound weight on my back, because I can't seem to get from underneath it, and I'm going to push it off somehow, get dressed, go to shul, be there on time, as an act of will. Now instinctually, I want to sleep.
As an act of will.
Yeah, that's
as opposed to commanded to.
No. The act of will is to do the commandment. You're choosing to do the commandment.
Oh.
That's how it works. The act of will is only important in terms of. It takes an act of will to choose chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream too, but it's a little bit meaningless because it doesn't have really any ultimate consequences. Will only makes a difference when you do the moral thing over the less moral thing. That's the choice you're supposed to make. That's the commandment. The commandment is to do the moral thing, and you chose against. That's why, for example, a person, let's say, who becomes Baal Tshuva, And eating kosher was very hard for them. They were using tray food the entire time. And for the first year, they struggled eating kosher food. But now by the second year, it's not even a shiloh. Not even a shiloh. Like, I'm not going to eat tray food. It can be a fast day. I'm not going to eat tray food. I'm a frum Jew. It's kosher food. His schar goes down tremendously because that mitzvah has become instinctual. He might consider living by a higher level of kashrus now, at that point in time. Because you need the challenge. The challenge is the mitzvah. And then it's the challenge that makes your will meaningful.
Could I ask you to address something?
You can try.
Okay. You can wear your pants, you don't have to put a dress on. No. Years ago, before I met Ali, I was walking with Dov Hiking. You know Dov Hiking. And at that time, I'm a Baal Shul, so I know all about this stuff. And I posed a challenge to him. Was it better to do the right thing for the wrong reason or the wrong thing for the right reason? And he said, well, I believe the Torah says we're commanded that if we do the right thing for the wrong reason, we'll be habituated to eventually do it for the right reason. Did I tell the truth?
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't change the other thing. And it's not a question of better. There are circumstances. The Gemara brings down a concept called an aver l'shma. An aver l'shma. Yael is held up in a high pedestal for doing an aver l'shma. Esther does an aver l'shma. It's complicated. It's not really a discussion for tonight.
Well, thank you. That's right. So it's not a simple answer. It's complicated. That's what
I'm just telling you, it's not as
you
obvious.
didn't disappoint. Yeah,
it's not as obvious as you make it to seem. But
that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
So you validated my thought. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
The book, not just another scenario, I think two, posed Rav Moshe Weiss, the Rosh Hashiva, being called up to the Prime Minister, the acting Prime Minister, and the beginning of Mashiach comes. So, is this a mashal, or is it? I mean, it was based on a lot of obviously research, but is this going to play out, or is it just how you?
Did I write that book with prophecy? No, just hoping to make a profit. But I was just trying to create a scenario that was relatable to everybody, so people could imagine in their lifetime how this type of thing could be very natural and unfold. I have no idea how it's going to play out. I was just my imagination. But the amazing thing is, Brian, I'll just tell you, that when you write books like that, it's amazing how they take over your life while you're involved with them. That book became my life at the time I was working on it. I used to walk out of the house and look for like Iraqi planes, flying over, and you got to stay by the bus stop and you can paranoid, like the world's going to change in a second now. But it takes over. But it was like, it's imagination. But the goal of that book was to make it tangible, so people start thinking about it. How it's going to play out, If it does work it that way, I wish I charged more. Okay, I think we're going to call it tonight.
Is that book here?
No.